Welcome to Kathryn Raaker's World. Innovation, culture, adventure, fashion and health, artists, destinations, traditions. This is Kathryn Raaker's World.
Hi, this is Kathryn Raaker of Kathryn Raaker's World and Kathryn Raaker's Let's Just Talk. I have today an honored guest, Bill Seitz, who is the majority leader of the Ohio House of Representatives. He's very colorful for his floor speeches and legal acumen. In 2016, ranking of all 132 legislators published by Columbus Monthly Magazine, Seitz was rated best speechmaker, savviest, funniest, and most knowledgeable, and was also recognized as the second most effective and hardest working. He has put these talents to good use on issues that matter to his constituents. Seitz began his public service career as a member of the Cincinnati Board of Education and the St. Antoninus Parish Education Commission. He was twice elected Green Township trustee, where he also served as president of the Hamilton County Township Association. He has never forgotten his local government roots, and we want to welcome him today. I've known Bill for how many years? Probably 20 or 30 years now.
Probably.
And you were in Kiwanis with me, right?
Right.
But we both have traveled the world. I've lived around the world. And I want to talk about the national issues today, Bill, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Number one, we're coming up to an election very shortly. We've been in a pandemic. We've gone through the whole thing with everything from the China situation to whatever. So tell me, I want to hear your views as a congressman who's been in politics for a long time. What do you think is going to happen? And do you really believe that we want to go back to what we had before economically? I mean, we will go ahead with economics. I believe the American people actually want to get out and spend money and do things and go back to work. Tell me what you think worldwide.
Well, Kathryn, let's start with this. I mean, Donald Trump gave us the greatest economy the world has ever known. The pandemic put a short circuit to that. But the question for the American voters in about 5 months will be, who do you think is best situated to resurrect that economy? Is it Donald Trump, who already proved that he can do it once? Or is it Joe Biden, who had 8 years under Barack Obama to prove it, and he didn't? Is it Donald Trump, who, despite the occasional malaprop and the occasional crass comment, has nonetheless effectively delivered on his promises to the American people? Or is it Joe Biden, who to this day cowers in his basement with his mask on and is beginning to show signs of early onset senility? I've unfortunately lived with a lot of relatives who had dementia. And it can be a very rapidly progressing disease. And that means that if folks are willing to take a chance on Joe Biden at age 78, they better pay very close attention to who he picks for his vice president, because that person may end up having to ride herd if Mr. Biden is elected. We're going to have a very stark difference between the Republicans and the Democrats this summer. The Democrats have already decided they're not going to have a typical traditional convention, nominating convention. They're going to do it virtually. I don't really know how that works. I think you're going to lose a lot of the enthusiasm that comes by watching the traditional convention. Donald Trump, on the other hand, has pledged that come hell or high water, we're going to have a traditional convention. And if we can't have it in Charlotte, North Carolina, which is where it's currently slated to be, because the North Carolina governor will not guarantee Donald Trump that we can do it there, Donald Trump has said, we'll go to Georgia, we'll go to Florida. You could probably probably do it in one of the indoor stadiums in those two states and do it in a way that establishes responsible social distancing among the delegates. And he's going to deliver that convention, and his convention and the Democrat convention will provide two very different views of the way America should develop. The economy, no question, is in trouble right now. But the stock market has held up reasonably well because compared to the rest of the world, the United States is the last best chance. The rest of the world's economy is actually in worse shape than ours is. Okay?
That's right. That's right.
And we've learned some lessons through the last few months. Number one, I hope we've learned that it's time to reshore to American shores the manufacturing of certain key things, pharmaceuticals, personal protective equipment, computer equipment. We have let the Chinese have way too much of that. And now we've seen what they've been able to do. I think it's very telling and very damning, frankly, that when their outbreak happened in Wuhan, they barred domestic air travel to Beijing, to Shanghai,
right,
but did not take any steps to bar international air travel. There's a huge Chinese presence in Italy, and Italy was hit very hard by COVID-19.
Right.
In Iran was hit very hard.
Spain,
the Chinese exported the virus to the rest of the world.
right.
And I think they will pay a price in the world's eyes for having acted in such an irresponsible way. But the lesson for the United States is that's what happens when you let the state control too much of society. In China, the Communist Party controls everything that's going on, to the point where they actually silenced the doctors that were trying to get the word out about this pandemic. So I think the lesson is it's time to reassert the cause of freedom and liberty in the United States.
And and you remember that we lost a lot of our manufacturing, our steel manufacturing,
yes,
and all that. So that's the reason why Made in America is important.
I think it is. And I think the people of America now understand that if we have to pay somewhat higher prices for those things on which we all depend,
right,
like pharmaceuticals, like computer ingredients, like personal protective equipment that is needed for medical purposes, I think most of us are willing to pay a few shekels more so that we have it, so that we can't let our economic enemies control our medical and way of life future. And so I hope that lesson has been learned, and I would remind everybody, it wasn't Joe Biden that called China out from day one. It was Donald Trump. Donald Trump went against the conventional wisdom when he was first elected and said, we are going to do something about these unfair trade deals that we've had with China.
Right.
And we are going to make them play by the same rules that the rest of the international community plays by. And they're not going to be able to steal our intellectual property, and they're not going to be allowed to unfairly subsidize their industries to the point where they have an unfair economic advantage compared to the rest of us. Donald Trump did that. That was not what Barack Obama did. That was not what Joe Biden did. They viewed Russia as the bigger enemy. And the truth of the matter is the Chinese economy is far bigger than the Russian economy. And China, in the long term, I think, creates a far greater degree of unsettled turmoil in the world as compared to any other country in the world. They have a huge population of 1.4 billion. They have a very assertive, robust military. They've been exporting to third world countries through their Belt and Road Initiative all kinds of lavish public works projects in an effort to buy loyalty from third world countries. They will end up controlling strategic ports around the world. This is very scary for people like me, like you, who take the long view of what we should be looking at in American politics.
And then the other thing is the thing that's going on in Hong Kong right now.
Right.
When the British, that whole strategic thing about the British in turning over
Right.
Hong Kong back to the Chinese. Didn't we think that was going to happen?
Well, I think a lot of people bought a pig in a poke and believed that the Chinese would respect the independence of Hong Kong. And as we've seen in the last year or two, that is a false promise. The good people of Hong Kong, who had a very prosperous economy, now are seeing their freedoms suppressed as the Chinese Communist Party has tightened its grip on Hong Kong. That's very unfortunate. Hopefully, Hong Kong will maintain some semblance of independence, but it's a scary thing. And so when we look around the world, I want a strong leader like Donald Trump. I'm going to vote for Donald Trump. I don't know if he's going to win. I would say his chances are probably less now than they were 3 months ago, because 3 months ago he could point to record low unemployment, record high stock market, record economic prosperity. All of that was true, and he brought it about. But then along came the Chinese Wuhan pandemic, and now that has set us back a few steps. So we have to reset the table and figure out who is going to be better positioned to bring us back to that former prosperity.
I think he is, and I'll tell you why. I am very optimistic. I'm getting a lot of phone calls from people that are not only new businesses, but old businesses that are now going back to work, and they believe in him and they want him. I mean, what would happen to our stock market? Let me ask you a question. Where is Nancy Pelosi? She's at home, right?
Yeah, they are actually
July 31st. Is that when are they going back?
They're now trying to be able to conduct Congress remotely by proxy voting, and I think there's problems with that. Now, all is not lost. I followed very closely a recent special election for Congress in California, where a former military fellow by the name of Mike Garcia actually flipped from Democrat to Republican, a congressional seat in California. That's the first time that had happened in over 20 years. So you might be right that the Republicans still have a decent chance of holding the Senate and maybe picking up some seats in the House. But time will tell, and I'm not Karnak, and neither are you. And much is going to happen over the next 5 months. I hope we're able to get the coronavirus under control. I hope we're able to get past the fear and get back to work. I hope that the stock market holds up, as I think it will, because again, if you are an investor, where are you going to put your money? The banks are paying virtually zero in interest. The other countries around the world do not have the same economic resiliency that we do. So I think it's the safe bet to invest in the United States. And again, if we reshore to our shores from foreign shores some of these critical manufacturing things, all the way from roasting pans to pharmaceuticals, that would be a good thing, right?
Right. And I after the break, I want to tell you about a company right here in Ohio. Well, I have a minute left. It's called All American Clothing, and it's right outside of Dayton. And the cool part about it was they had Levi's, the gentleman that started the company, right, actually was a national salesperson for Levi's. When he found out that Levi's were being made somewhere else, he got so upset about it.
Right.
He came back to the United States. He actually started his own brand.
Okay.
And just recently, a gentleman from Indianapolis bought the company, Joe Van Diemen. I'll say that again, Joe Van Diemen bought it. And it's actually going absolutely great. And I'm so excited about working with some of these wonderful people that are going to change the way we think.
Right. Well,
and they can do it.
I think they can.
And on that note, I need to take a short break, and we'll be right back with William Seitz, who is the majority leader in the Ohio House of Representatives. We'll be right back. We are back with Bill Seitz, the majority leader of the Ohio House of Representatives, on Kathryn Raaker's Let's Just Talk and Kathryn Raaker's World. And we're going to talk about the Supreme Court and judges now, if you don't mind, Bill.
Sure.
Would you mind telling us what's going on there?
Well, I think one of the biggest achievements that Donald Trump and Mitch McConnell have brought to America in the last 4 years is the spate and the number, approximating 200 of lifetime federal judges that have now been confirmed and are sitting on the federal district court bench, the federal appeals court bench, and of course the two justices that have been confirmed to the Supreme Court, Gorsuch and Kavanaugh. And that is so important because these judges have lifetime tenure. And conservative judges, I think, are far more in line with where the American public is than the liberal activist judges that had a history of just writing the law to suit their own purposes, no matter what the legislature said, no matter what Congress said. A very good example of the importance of the federal judiciary came just this past week. We had a Democrat federal judge that issued an order that said that even though the Ohio Constitution requires that ballot initiatives get all their signatures by July 1 and that they get them on written petitions, he said, well, no, I'm going to extend that to July 31 because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And I'm also going to allow them to turn in electronic signatures instead of real signatures on real pieces of paper. That was his decision. Within 1 week, 3 conservative judges, one or two of which was appointed by Trump, reversed that decision and said, sorry, you, Mr. District Judge, do not have the power to rewrite the Ohio Constitution. Another federal district judge in North Carolina, a Trump appointee, in a similar case, said, there is no pandemic exception to the United States Constitution. The rules are the rules, and the rules must be followed. Now, you are finding this all across the country as Trump appointees are restoring the rule of law and curbing the activist judges who had been appointed by Clinton and appointed by Obama. And that's so important because elections are about the most important thing we do.
That's right.
And if we're going to let judges rewrite election law to suit their own purposes, that is a very scary thing. Right. And so, whatever people think about Mr. Trump, and I've had my differences with Mr. Trump, and he does tend to put things bluntly, to put it blunt.
I'd rather have somebody that's more blunt than not.
Well, there's a certain presidential diplomacy that is important, okay? And he might be a little lacking in that department. I'm just trying to be fair. But despite all that, his basic instinct on judges is alone a tremendous reason why folks should support his reelection. Right. Because he will probably have the chance, if given a second term, to pick 1 or 2 more Supreme Court judges, thereby assuring the American public for the next 20 or 30 or 40 years that we will indeed continue to be ruled by the rule of law, by the original Constitution, the founding documents, not some revised interpretation made up to suit the times that we're in, but again, hearkening back to the original intent of what the founding fathers meant when they wrote that Constitution of ours. And I hope Trump gets that opportunity.
My question is, what do you think that happened in the past week or two with General Flynn and the district judge?
Well, there's another example of a judge that is completely departed from what the judge's role is. When the United States government realized what a sham it was that they had put General Flynn through, when they realized that he was essentially framed and compelled to lie under oath in order to save his son, the United States decided to drop the case against General Flynn.
Right.
And the Democrat federal judge not only refused to drop the case, he appointed another Democrat federal judge to tell him why he shouldn't drop the case. The way prosecutions work is, once the prosecution decides to drop the case, that's it. The judge has no role in deciding whether the case should continue or not. The judge is supposed to be the umpire. The judge is not supposed to be weighing in on one side or the other.
So what do you think is going to happen?
I think that judge will be reversed. I have very little doubt about that, and I have very little doubt that ultimately General Flynn the case will go away. But at what cost to General Flynn?
It cost him
His reputation,
right,
his fortune, his money, his prestige, his ability to continue serving in the Trump administration. And for what? Because certain people were out, the deep state was out to frame him. The deep state was out to prove a mantra that has since been proven not to have existed. I mean, I think folks got to realize, and many Americans do realize, there is a deep state in this country. These are career bureaucrats that are threatened by people like General Flynn and Donald Trump, who want to upset the apple cart of the way people always did business in the swamp. And therefore, whether it's Peter Strzok or Lisa Page or Comey or any of them, they were, in my view, actively conspiring to suppress the truth and do in President Trump and key members of his cabinet. And I think we're getting the truth out about that slowly but surely.
And do you think any of them will go to jail?
Well, I don't know about that. I mean, again, I'm not privy to whether that will happen or not. I think it would be sufficient vindication to show that it was all a scam from day one, and that would be sufficient. I don't know that we need to take these guys and throw them into jail. I really don't. But I think they should be publicly reprimanded for their complicity in this deep state conspiracy to undo Donald Trump.
Right. So what do you think we should be doing in the next 5 or 6 months to help Mr. Trump get elected?
Well, what we should all be doing is talking to our neighbors. What we should all be doing is getting the truth out, and that in itself is a tough job given the bias of the liberal media. But shows like this are a great way to get the truth out and the facts out. We need an engaged, informed public, and we need to be talking it up, because if the folks that think like you and me sit on our heinies come November, we will wake up on November 4th with Joe Biden, and who knows who his vice president's going to be, Kamala Harris, Stacey Abrams, Elizabeth Warren, who knows, okay? But any of that, in my judgment, would be a very dark, sad day for America.
Because they believe in the Green New Deal, and
which would bankrupt this country.
Backwards.
It would bankrupt this country. They believe in much higher taxes. They believe in government running the economy. They believe in everything that would send us backwards and not forwards. And I think that's very frightening. Donald Trump has rebuilt our military. I think the Democrats' record on military preparedness is awful. Okay, you saw it with Benghazi. You saw it with Hillary Clinton's being Secretary of State. Donald Trump has brought back the military. Okay, Donald Trump will secure our borders.
Look at SpaceX. Look at what just happened.
What just happened? A beautiful
and
launch.
Space Force.
Private American ingenuity.
Right.
That's what put SpaceX into orbit.
That's right.
And that's what we've got to encourage.
And I think that we need to encourage more and more people to become entrepreneurs and to start their own businesses seriously, because we are very creative as Americans. And I have to tell you, I'm just so proud to be working with you and others. It's hard to be a conservative. I mean, especially in the media. Okay.
Yeah, true.
You have to look at both sides. When I have to have a political situation, I have to have both sides.
Sure.
Right. But I won't let them take the gloves off to the point where they're going to kill each other.
Right.
Hello.
Right.
I believe that we can do it in a democratic way. I'll tell you, some of the new congressmen that we have in are fighters. I've never seen anybody like Jim Jordan.
Yep.
I'm using Ohio as a good example, right?
Sure.
But Jim Jordan, they're not afraid.
Well, yeah.
They're not afraid.
I served in the Ohio legislature with Jim Jordan before he was elected to Congress. He's a fine American. Brad Wenstrup, Congressman Wenstrup, is a fraternity brother of mine, and a military hero and a doctor in his own right. He certainly understands health care. He was a hero and helped save the life of Congressman Scalise.
Scalise, right.
He went to Iraq and did yeoman's work as a surgeon. Even though he was a podiatrist, he was pressed into duty as a surgeon over there and helped save American lives. lives during the conflict in Iraq. So those are the kinds of people we need in Congress, and I hope they're returned because they're great folks.
Right. So I really believe that you have to have people that really care about the Constitution,
Right.
care about our Bill of Rights, and why we became a country in the first place.
That's right.
And so I really believe that we can do it as Americans if we stick together. And we want to thank all the people that have helped through the COVID-19,
Right.
that are real soldiers for
Yes,
our
that's right.
country. And I think that we need to live in peace again.
I think that's very
And
true.
I think that the left press needs to clean up their act.
Right.
And this whole thing with Twitter and everything else that is going on.
That's concerning to me. When Twitter and Facebook can start censoring people. And they've done that throughout this COVID crisis. Anybody that is coming up with a narrative that is different than the fear-mongering narrative that the press has been feeding us gets their post taken off of YouTube or Twitter or Facebook. It's scary.
Well, it's happened to a lot of the people that I know, that I work with,
Right.
that are clients.
Right.
That because they have a different view, and it's really scary when you do it to the President of the United States as well.
That's true.
Okay, so I'm glad we're doing something, and they should be regulated like everybody else through the FCC instead of what's going on, because they're really, it's similar to AT&T when AT&T, they broke up AT&T, right?
Right. Well,
So we'll see what happens.
yes, we'll see what happens.
And
but
actually, there should be competition.
yeah, there should be.
And I think that's what's going to happen.
Well, there have been important antitrust. You know, I'm an antitrust lawyer by trade. There's been important antitrust cases brought around the world against Google and some of these big tech companies challenging the way in which they have become so big. And
That's
so
right.
we may see more of that
Right.
in a second Trump administration. It's very concerning to me. And you know, it's also concerning to me that the traditional print press is but a shadow of its former self.
That's right.
Okay? I
That's
mean,
right.
if that's a shame. And I believe in local journalism, and I believe in investigative journalism. And you're getting less and less of it from a purely objective standpoint than you used to back in the day. Okay?
Right.
So we ought to be concerned about that too.
I can't thank you enough. We've run out of time.
Again.
And want to invite you back
Thank you.
anytime
Great.
To give our listeners and our viewers information that they need to be educated on,
Right.
if they're not.
Right.
Thank you so very much for joining us today.
Thank you, Kathryn. It's great.
And please give the website for your...
That's anybody who wants to get a hold of me through my State House Rep 30, REP 30 at ohiohouse.gov.
And also go to our websites at KathrynRakersWorld.com and Let'sJustTalkRadio.com.